Hi, welcome to the coaching game. I'm Laurie Lawson, and tonight I am so thrilled to have a longtime friend that I haven't talked to in almost a decade, Niall Heenan. Hey, Niall, how are you?
Hi, Laurie. I'm good. It's really good to connect with you.
Oh, it's so good. We're going to catch up on air. Y'all can join us. Let me just tell you, Niall is an executive coach. He works in leadership development. He's a life coach, and he does a little career development coaching. And we met through Points of View, which is kind of what this show is based on, the coaching game. And so we both agree that visuals are really important when it comes to coaching. So Niall, tell me what you've been doing for the last 10 years. I will tell you that I was always jealous of you because you took Points of View and you just took it and went with it. It's like I'm doing workshops, I'm doing this, I'm using it. So what have you been doing for the last 10 years? And specifically we'll talk about 2020, but what's going on?
Well, it's really interesting when you say that I was one of the first in that group. We trained together at Points, and I didn't realize I was one of the first to embrace Points of View, the whole game, the coaching game in my practice. I was really drawn to it at the very beginning. I came across it quite soon after I trained as a coach through the International Coaching Federation. That was around 2010, I think it was. Yeah, I just loved the visual aspect of it. I loved the fact that it could allow people to express themselves in a way through the cards, through the vision, through the imagery, and through the words, and it's a very safe way for people to explore topics. I must say, I really, really love that.
I did. I really don't understand it, but I used it with executives. I used it with previously incarcerated men. And it just, though it breaks down a wall, and I'm sure there's psychological studies that have been done. I'm not sure how or why, but it really does cut to the chase, sort of, right?
And I think it allows me. I think maybe with men, not just women, but I've had the experience of men who maybe couldn't find the words to explain something or were a bit reluctant to engage in a process, and they'd pick up a card and they'd speak to the card, and the really powerful moments occurred. So I must say, I really treasured from that point, from that aspect. And that's what and I miss not being able to use it much now because since the last 13 months or so, like everyone in the world, all the work has gone like virtually. But I still have my deck here beside me on my desk every day.
And I know, and we were talking, you pull it out just like I do. It's like, it's just invaluable. And if you don't have a deck, and if you don't know what the heck we're talking about, just go get a picture. Get a picture that appeals to you and just go with it. See where you end up with it. It's pretty amazing. And I think that's how you and I stayed connected because of that. So what you mentioned, what's happening in Ireland right now? I mean, pandemic, post-pandemic, pandemic, what's going on?
We're still in it. We're still locked down, even though restrictions are easing up. We can now travel like within our county regions or slightly beyond that. A lot of people are still working remotely, and will continue to work remotely, I'd say, for several more months. A lot of businesses are still closed because your traditional, your barbers, your hairdressers, your conventional retail, unless it's essential, they're not open.
Ah,
So it's having an impact. It is having an impact on a lot of people. But I think people have adapted well, and a lot of opportunities have arisen as well for people. A lot of people. I live in the countryside here in Ireland. A lot of people have moved back to maybe more remote areas, or gone back home, or they don't have to commute as much, and things are working out. It's been a really interesting time at many levels. So everyone's experience is different. You have whatever 5 million different versions of the world going on in Ireland right.
exactly. And that's just in your country. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. People have moved out of the city. People have moved into the city here. I'm in New York City. And it's just, I think adaptation is really something, a skill that we've had to really enhance and work on. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about resilience. Tell me about that, because I know you help organizations and individuals build resilience. First of all, what does that mean?
Well, for me, and in the work I tend to do in the area of resilience, it really is about people's ability to manage and come back from adversity, from this to bounce back, to take the knocks and realize the knocks don't necessarily have to last, but we can understand these situations, we can learn from them, and we can come back as maybe even as better people than we were beforehand. I became interested in resilience going back around the time that I was training coaching, around that same time, the early 2010, 2011, 2012, we hit a pretty bad recession here in Ireland due to the banking crisis. So a lot of people I was working with had lost their jobs, had lost their businesses, and a lot of personal impact. So that's where the resilience and kind of and associated topics such as mindfulness and reflective practice, I kind of explored those areas, and that's where my interest in resilience came from. And now in the last 12 months, with a lot of people working from home and organizations having to adapt and managers having to adapt how they work with their teams, a lot of interest again, a lot of interest in the whole topic again. So I deliver a lot of training programs on resilience to teams of people and individuals.
Are you able to do that virtually? You can. Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole virtual delivery, whether it's over Teams or Zoom or WebEx or whatever the channel is, it's been really, really interesting. And I must say, I have found it really exciting, and being able to recreate very empathetic and very participatory and very deep and meaningful training experiences online. I had a participant on a program recently, and she said she was 20 years involved in industry, and it was the best, most interactive and most engaging training that she ever had, a full day program, all virtually.
I don't quite know why, but I understand that. I'm a member of an organization who shall remain nameless. And the first time I got involved it was in person in another state, and I did not have a good time. It was like, I don't like this. But they had to do it virtually for the last couple of years, and I love it. And I'm not sure why, if it's the freedom, but you can connect with whom you like. And I don't know, I just think it widens your opportunities actually to get to know people, more people, because there's so many people involved in that. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that someone liked your training and was mesmerized for the entire session. It was, yeah.
I think the same essential elements need to be there. You need to build trust with your group. You need to build empathy. You need to be open and honest. You need to know those first 20 seconds when you meet someone, first impressions are really important. So you have to work on that. So you need to do your best as a presenter or as a trainer.
Tell me, how do you build trust virtually?
That's a really good question.
I want to know because I do so much stuff virtually. I want to know.
I think sometimes I have engaging with the participants on a program in advance. So we'd exchange emails. So there may be some specific issues that people may want to know. So you would do a lot of contracting, perhaps, and ground rules as to what's said and what's not said. I think also it's about allowing people to be themselves. So I would encourage people to turn on their cameras so I can see them. But if they choose to turn them off for something, that's okay as well. But you do need a certain number of people who you can see, so you can create a sense that we're all here in this room. And also, I tell people it's okay for mistakes to happen. Like, it's okay for partners or children or dogs to run into your camera and interrupt you if you're working from home, because that's life. If it can happen it happened with news readers that they were interrupted by family members. So it can happen at high level, like broadcasting corporations. It's okay for it to happen like in a room if you're working from home. I think too, it's about the listening part and about the voice and about working on the eye contact and just reassuring people that it's okay, and we're normal people, and also that we are not recording a session or a training session, we're not feeding back to anyone else. And obviously remembering too that while you try and keep it confidential, but obviously you're not going to tell any deep issues with other people in a room as you would in a real physical room.
That's true. Yeah, that is that's an obstacle, but it seems like you can overcome that, and you have overcome that. It's interesting because what's your philosophy on, if you have a group of 10, do you call them all out to speak, or do you let them go at their own pace and say, you know what, if you don't want to talk, you don't have to talk? How do you encourage participation?
Yeah, these are good questions, Laurie. You're asking great questions about it.
Mostly because I'm curious, because I want to know how to do it also.
It comes down to getting a sense of your people. Some people are very willing to volunteer information, willing to raise their hand and answer questions. Some people are less so. And I remember I had one person on a group. We were doing kind of a wrap up at the end of a program with one group, and we went around the room. So I called on people just for a closing comment, because that's, I knew them all. I know we had empathy and rapport, so they wouldn't mind. When we came towards one of the last people, and she was number 15th person, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm really nervous about what I'm going to say because I've been waiting for my turn," and kind of felt kind of intimidated by that. And I found that is very, very valuable learning. So since then, I tend not to call on people, unless at the start when people introduce themselves, I call on them. But then after that, if someone doesn't want to speak up, there may be loads of reasons for that. There may be a quieter person or whatever. I tend to do a lot of work in small groups. So I use breakout rooms a lot. And I find that's a fantastic facility. If you have a group of 15 people, I'm constantly, breaking into groups of 3 or 4 and letting them do a piece of work. And I join them in the breakout room, and maybe they'll feed back through some other mechanism to the main group. And you're constantly moving people around. I think that sense of people think that this is fun, this is interesting. I only have to speak to 3 or 4 at a time. So it overcomes that fear of speaking to a larger group.
I like that philosophy. And as you said, like dogs walking through and things like that. I know specifically, I turned off my email before we started, and those little chimes you're hearing, I'm downloading every email I've ever received in my life. So just pretend like an angel gets their wings or something. I don't know what that sound is, but surely it will stop soon. I apologize for that. Let's get back to you, because it's
like a mindfulness gong that it'll refocus every time we hear it.
Stay away. Yes. I cannot believe how many emails we're downloading, but what are you going to do? Technology, that's one of the drawbacks. But so tell me, how did your coaching change? Now I know it went from in person to virtual, but how did it change during 2020? What things, I know you addressed resiliency, but what other areas did you find that you had to address that maybe you weren't concentrating on prior to 2020?
Yeah. I think from the initial coaching connection with someone, it's different when you're connecting virtually. Before you could arrive into a room with someone, so it's a lot easier to read a body language, a lot easier to build a rapport on that one-to-one basis. However, I think as people have become more and more accustomed with virtual meetings, it's become more second nature. So that's no longer the issue it was. In terms of topics, I find that a lot of people are coming to me around, maybe because of the pandemic, they were working from home, or their work situation has changed, and maybe their family situation has changed. There's a lot of reassessing of values, or a lot of reassessing of what should I be doing here? And because here in Ireland, a lot of the industry is located in a few cities, so it would not be uncommon for people to be commuting 2 hours or longer, in the morning from up to Dublin or whatever, and spending a lot of the time on the train or in traffic, and coming home late and missing out on their kids going to bed and that having. So a lot of people kind of said, hold on a second, maybe we can move down the country and buy a cheaper property. Maybe only one of us needs to work full time, and maybe we've cheaper childcare or whatever. So there was a lot of reassessing our own values and what was important for people.
That's so interesting, because at the beginning of 2021, one of my groups, we were doing that coaching thing, like what's your word for 2021? And I said, I think my word or my goal is I'm going to redefine fun, because all of the stuff that I used to do, it's not really that much fun anymore. There's no theater, there's no so I'm going to have to find fun somewhere else. And that hits right where you said with your values. It's like a realignment of values. Did you find that companies were doing that also?
I think so. And a lot of companies discovered that they could trust their staff a lot more than maybe they were in the past. Yeah. They could trust their teams to work remotely. In many companies, productivity went up because people could do their work, they could communicate, work remotely, they could supervise remotely. And I think it was a transformation experience for many, many organizations. And now here in Ireland, as we move back, and I would imagine within the next 4 or 5 months or so, we'll be back to normal, or what was normal.
Right.
And a lot of companies are talking about having blended models and hybrid models of working, and where people can mix, spend a certain amount of the week either working remotely or work from home and then work in the office. I do think, and there's a lot more, I suppose, interest now in Ireland about remote working hubs, that maybe work from home wasn't the solution, because not everyone has a house with space and everything. If you're working out in an apartment, maybe, and you've no family members, getting your dedicated workspace isn't easy. So I do think there'll be an opportunity for small collective spaces where maybe 20, 30 people could work together, not necessarily for the same organization, but they can come together and do their work and still have that social interaction and the cup of coffee and whatever, which is so important. Because we don't just work for work's sake. We work because we like the interaction and the feedback from other people.
Oh, I like that idea. A virtual hubs, yeah, where everybody can sort of, I guess we do that with Starbucks or wherever people go when they don't have Wi-Fi, unfortunately. There are parking lots and things like that. So yeah, so how will you adjust? I agree with you. I think that 9 to 5 in the office forever and ever, Monday through Friday, I think that's over. I think that the companies, one, they're going to save some money, and two, I think the employees have gotten spoiled, for lack of a better word. It's like, they've gotten used to, I can do this. I find I'm working more than I work, I'm working more because of the shutdown, but that's okay. I'm not complaining. But how are you going to adjust? How are you going to adjust to when it does go back to what we're calling, when the pendulum swings to the middle? Let's say that. I can't say normal because I'm not sure we'll go back to whatever normal is. How are you going to adjust your coaching and your training for people?
Well, I hope, tend to work myself on maintaining the virtual delivery. I think for lots of reasons, there's economic and there's economic and environmental and social benefits for if I'm doing a one-day program somewhere, rather than me traveling to Dublin, or people come from all over the country to be in a room and for 1 or 2 days, whereas we can still do that effectively remotely. So we could build that in. There'll probably be then events when I'll have to travel and I will be back in the physical room, and that'll be good too. But I'm hoping we won't lose all that we've learned, because like even the other day, I delivered a 2-day program, and that was a program that I used to deliver in the real space. So that would necessitate me going to Dublin, which is a 100-mile journey, a 100-mile drive or train trip. And I wouldn't be home till late in the evening. So when it all finished at 4:30, it always takes me a while maybe to decompress after a virtual training event, because it's a lot of adrenaline there. But then like an hour later, my wife and I were able to travel down we live near a beautiful lake. We were able to get down there, sit in the sun, and we had a beautiful evening for about an hour just sitting out there. And we're just saying we wouldn't have had that opportunity if we had been working the way we used to work. So I'm hoping the pendulum doesn't swing back. I hope we don't lose a lot of the good things that we've learned. And also before, with my training programs and my coaching, my main sell was in person. And then you'd say, well, we can do this virtually if you wish as well. But now I flipped that over. The virtual is the way it's going to be. And for a lot of people, I do a lot of work in the not-for-profits and community space as well. And those clients maybe can't travel too easily, or maybe it's a short course and they can tie it in with their day. People have said it, I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for COVID. I wouldn't be able to do this if it was in the real space. Well, the physical space. This is real too, but it's just delivered differently.
That's interesting, because I do a lot of work for the coaching school from which I graduated, and their attendance, they so many disabled people have now been able to take the training because they switched over to virtual. So there are blessings. There are most definitely blessings. And what I know you think we should work on resiliency. What other traits or what other values do you think we should be working on? Wow, because I agree, the pendulum's not going to swing back to where it was, and I'm not sure we want it to. The middle would be nice, a little bit of both. But what should we be working on while we're waiting for the pendulum to equalize and equilibrium and all that? What should we be working on now? What opportunities should we take advantage of?
Well, I think we should take advantage of the fact that we know we can do this. We had a digital revolution that no one asked for. We can do this. It is not something that only a few people can do. We can all do this. All ages can do it. I've had retired people in their 80s, on training programs, on kind of resilience training programs and change programs, and they have been managing the buttons and managing the technology extremely well. So I do think we need to maintain that. I do think we need to see, well, how can we change our ways of working so that smaller communities and more quieter countryside areas can offer quality of life opportunities for people, where maybe property is cheaper and where schooling is more available. And it'd be wonderful. Here in Ireland, we have maybe a large countryside area that has suffered from migration and people moving out of the areas. And now here's an opportunity for a lot of towns and villages to kind of revitalize themselves again. Have a space where, instead of maybe 20 people from the area traveling out of the area every day, that they go, maybe 10 of them go work in a virtual hub or a remote hub, and then they can maybe avail of the local shops, maybe they can avail of the local coffee shops, maybe their kids can go to school locally, and that would bring life and it would not just bring life, it would bring social life back into the communities, which would be really, really good to see.
I hope you're on a town council somewhere. Those are great ideas. You're really doing big picture stuff, and that's phenomenal. New York City would not be happy to hear you say that, but
I would love. It's on this to get to New York City. Hopefully by the end of this year. But I do think also too is that I think our values. So what matters to you? I know my values. I reassess things in the last 12 months. It was an opportunity. There was a collective stopping. We were very fortunate here in Ireland when we went into lockdown in March 2020. We had about 7 weeks of glorious weather, wonderful weather. It was like being on a holidays for many people. Oh, there was the uncertainty economically, but in fairness to the government, they stepped into that space. But people just realized, well, maybe we live in a beautiful area. Maybe I don't need to be as busy. Maybe I don't need to work as hard. Maybe I don't need all these cars, right? Because our car is parked up now. Maybe
where we going? Yeah.
Where we going? Exactly. And we only need to be, and the one pair of jeans does me all week long, because no one sees it anyway, because I'm only working from here up. So.
That's true. Just work on the upper part, the bust. Yeah, so I'm hearing you say resilience, one thing, just hang in there, which I think we've all done. I'm also hearing you say adaptation. It's like, how can you adapt to what's going on? And you've taken it even, how can you expand what's going on? I love your thoughts on the virtual hubs and bringing back life to small communities. And value assessment, certainly. I'm trying to think, what else is going to get us through and sustain us? I'm trying to go back to, I'm trying to go back to the points of view cards, which are so marvelous. I think one is gratitude that we're here. It's like, and that we've survived thus far. Pick another card out of your memory. What would be a good thing to do? Oh, I know another one. I know all of them.
Well, I love that timing card. If you're familiar with the one, it's a little robin that's about to land on the handle of a spade.
Yeah.
And I think there's something there, and I actually have it in front of me. I just picked it up this morning, and that I think in the moment, and this links in with the resilience, but it links in with the gratitude, is acknowledging in each day what's important, what matters. Mm. So when I work with people around resilience, we do work around things like gratitude. We do work around on reflective practice. We do work around the breath. And I often think of an older person who's long since passed that I knew, who you say, pray for what you have, not for what you don't have. So, which is another way of gratitude.
Definitely.
And recognizing because I do think we all got caught up in another rat race again of our own possessions, around being busy, about moving fast. Yeah, listen, rediscover the joys of making that cup of coffee at home, maybe, and if you're lucky enough to be near a park or to get outside, or even have some nice house plants, or even have whatever, just stop, look at the beauty outside the window. We had a conversation with a client recently, and we just began to reminisce, and she said that she remembers as a child just stopping and looking out the window, or maybe being in the car with our parents, and you could be stopped. Maybe maybe one of the parents has gone to a shop, and you'd be sitting in the back of the car. I don't know what it was like for you, but I can relate to this myself. And there wasn't a radio in the car. Your dad, my dad would be he might be reading the newspaper in front of the car, and you'd be sitting there, and you'd look out the window, and you used to observe the whole world. And there was so much to see in your imagination. But now when we stop, we pick up our phones, and we're scrolling through our phones, or we're scrolling through our screens. So just stop and look around us. There's so much there, and the moments are fleeting.
They certainly are, and becoming precious. I mean, they became precious in 2020, which is really very, I think, one of the greater benefits of the pandemic. But the other part I was thinking of was balance, which is like what you're talking about. It was like, okay, I'm going to work and I'm going to make this amount of money, and then I'm going to take a vacation for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to do this again. I'm going to keep climbing to the top. And I think now it's like, you know what, maybe the top isn't quite as appealing as we thought it was. And it's like, I like it right down here. Let me work on what I have. Just what you said, pray for what you have, not what you don't have. So I think we've learned balance. There are so many good things that can come out of this. And yes, there are horrible things that came out of it also. But for those of us that are around to tell the story, I think we need to tell it well. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing on an individual basis, and also you're developing leaders so they can do that too, right? It's like that's part of your coaching. You want to show them how to do it.
Yeah, and to explore new ways of doing things. One of the things I am so grateful for from the last 12 months is that it gave me time to stop. And I used doodle in the past, but I got so busy. And one day I just said, because I was posting something on LinkedIn, and I was saying, well, how do I convey what's going on right now? And I just took out my flip chart paper and took out my crayons and my colors, and I started drawing images and pictures. And then I showed to someone, they said, you put that up on LinkedIn. And it's amazing. The amount of interest and traction they've got has been really, really interesting.
It's funny. I came. If anybody wants, and we're almost out of time. If anybody wants to see what he's doing, I came across this on LinkedIn, and there was this fantastic collage of his drawing. So find Niall Heenan on LinkedIn, and you can see his latest drawing. I wish we had more time to talk about it, because I had mentioned that, but that's one way of expressing yourself, and this is another. And I'm so appreciative that you came on the show today, and you're sharing all your wisdom, and you really made me start thinking about virtual hubs. I think we all should be doing that. So thank you, Niall Heenan, for being on the show. Let's not take 10 years to catch up again. But I'm so glad you're out there doing what you were doing 10 years ago.
Well, it's been great to connect, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you again.
Thank you.